Howdy, sports fans. Thank you so very much for checking out the Sportsline Podcast. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Hey, folks, remember to tell your pals, share your favorite conversation shorts, and keep liking and subscribing because it's all for free, and we really appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Today, so much to chat about in the sports world. We're going to kind of slip away from our normal format and bring in our good friend of the podcast, Scott Radley. It's been a little bit, and you were the perfect person, I thought, to break down, discuss, give opinions of some of the topics that have happened in just the last couple of days. And first of all, I see that you've been fishing a lot, having a good time this summer.
We had some time up at the cottage, rent a cottage every year, and did some fishing. And you know, it's the perfect thing because it I am enthusiastic, though lacking skill of any kind. So it is just mine. You're sitting in the boat, water lapping against the side of the boat, just with the zzz. And if, you know, I'll maybe catch some things sometimes, but I don't care. The phone is off. I'm by myself for a while. It's early in the morning. It's, and I'm not keeping anything to eat anyway. So it's just, you know what it is. People listening, they know it's just clearing your head.
It really is. There's nothing like it. And unfortunately, because of my schedule, and I know you got a crazy schedule, you were able to get away. I have not been able to. I might be able to get a little away for maybe a little muskie fishing later in the fall, but just this summer and getting away and maybe catching some bass, which you know is always the most fun because they're always so enthusiastic. And it's always that hot action that you kind of miss. But yeah, there is nothing. You said it, just the splashing of the water on your boat.
I mean, I like catching fish, but I don't even care if I catch fish. Although my tackle box would suggest otherwise. I have every item. My wife gets mad because I have so many things, and I don't know how to use any of them. I know how to tie one kind of knot for my line, and I know a couple little things, and the rest of it is like, well, this probably works. I saw someone.
Dude, all you have to do is read the box. Super Sync, super scent, drives fish crazy.
It all sounds like that in Anchorman, the closet with the perfume, with the colognes, although none of them work. A few years ago, I saw a video for this lure called the Whopper Plopper.
Oh.
And it was showing, and of course, like being a sucker, it was showing every cast on the top of the water, it splashes and just whammo. And so I was like, well, I better get one of each size. I have never had a single bite on any of those things. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Anytime I buy something like that, I say, you know what? Those weren't for Canada. Like they're from like American fishers and in this deep south or something like that. It weren't made for Canadian open waters.
The worst part about it, it's actually the best part about it, but is I'll go out there, I'll get up on holiday, I'll be out on the water by 5 a.m. and I'll be out there for hours. And then, you know, my son will wake up and he'll text me and say, hey, I'll come out. Every year, I will put in hours more than him. And every year, without fail, he catches the bigger fish. A few years ago, you mentioned muskie. A few years ago, we're out there and he wanted to catch one. And the last day, reels in a 45-inch muskie.
No.
And I've been out there trying all week. And it's like I caught one and it was like this big. And I was like, come on. So anyway, it's the head clearing more than the gut cleaning.
It is. And cheers to those in Northern Ontario that make it so accessible for us and all those open lakes. And man, it's a wonderful thing. Let's kind of change topics here to why we're here.
From fish to fish.
From fish to fish, you're right. Thursday Night Football, Miami Dolphins humble 31-10 at home by the Buffalo Bills. Now, in the third quarter, Dolphins QB Tua Tagovailoa was ruled out of the game with a concussion after he scrambled for a first down, lowered his shoulder to initiate contact with Bills safety Damar Hamlin. Now, it's his third diagnosed concussion of his career. Scott, he's 26 years old. Simple question. Should he retire from the National Football League?
So I thought about this since last night. We were watching last night. I was watching last night with my son, and this is a much harder question a year ago, because a year ago he doesn't have a $214 million contract with 160 something million guaranteed. So if he walks away, if he retires because of an injury, unless I've got numbers wrong, and people can go check this, I believe he walks away with $160 million US. You can live pretty nicely. for many generations on 160 million US. Last year, when he didn't have that contract, I get how that would be just such a much more difficult decision. But $100 and whatever million, and you've seen other guys in football who have had concussion after concussion, and the problems, some of them are okay, but the problems other guys have, and guys who have horrible demises in the end, and they do an autopsy and look at their brain and they see the CTE stuff. And so, yeah, last night I was thinking about it. I thought, yeah, he probably really should. And then I came to a different conclusion, though, this morning when I woke up, and that is, look, if you're a football player, we are not unaware of the science now and the research on concussions. There's not a guy in the league that doesn't know someone who's had problems or doesn't know what they're saying concussions can do to you. And if you're a player who's got the money and has a family and still decides, I still want to play, why am I worried about it then? Why am I getting even bent out of shape? If you are ridiculous enough that you don't care about yourself, why am I getting worked up about being worried about you? That's on you.
You know, it's a great point, because I fashion football players as warriors.
Sure.
And I would put them very close in many, even though the sports are completely different, as, say, an F1 or an IndyCar driver. You recognize the danger of the sport. It's inherent in the sport. The possibility exists every single time you hop in the car, start the car, and drive away. It's inherent every time you go under center for quarterbacks, or any player for that matter, a running back, that this can happen. Look at what Tua did in that situation. He ran because it was a fourth down play, and he'd gotten the first down. Why didn't he slide? Because it's inherent on the quarterback to show leadership, to show that I'm down 31-10. We're doing everything to get back in there. And even though Tua has had this history, you can only play one way.
Yes, but
you're not going to change the way you play.
Josh Allen, who they were playing against last night for the Bills, Josh Allen is, I hate to say it, he's 10 times tougher and bigger than Tua. And he slides feet first. No one accuses Josh Allen of not being a tough warrior. Tua, you've had these situations before, and look, neither of us are a doctor, but we know there are varying degrees of concussions. And what we've seen with him is the experts tell us when you go into that fencing position and your fingers are all curled, those are they're all serious, but really serious.
That's head trauma.
Yeah, really serious stuff. Having had those and still deciding to play, I know you say there's only one way to play, but you learn. Boxers who learn they don't have a strong chin don't lead with their chin. They learn to fight a different way. Hockey players, Eric Lindros never figured out a different way to play, but other guys who have had it, if you've got a busted shoulder, this is the amazing part. If Tua had a busted shoulder rather than a head that had trauma, even though you say you only can play one way, you will never convince me he would have run into that tackle with that sore shoulder first. He wouldn't have done it because he would have been thinking about his sore shoulder.
The perfect example is the other side, the other quarterback. You brought him up, Josh Allen. He has a banged up hand, right? And he didn't run, and when he did run, he protected his arm.
If you had any other body part that was banged up or injured, or you would not lead with that body part. There is nobody that would do that. Our bodies are designed, our brains tell us don't do that. How he didn't spend, in addition to all the other time he reportedly spent on jiu-jitsu and judo and training and bulking up and getting stronger, how he didn't, maybe he did, but how he didn't spend 2 hours a day, honestly, just sliding to burn it into your brain muscle memory.
But there's situations behind that. Let's be honest. At that time of the game, the Dolphins, first of all, I had a friend that was at the game who's actually a Dolphins fan, and he stayed to the end because he lives in Canada and whatever. He said by that point of the game, 3/4 of the building was empty and was only Bills fan. The Dolphins, let's be honest here, they're getting absolutely humbled on national TV.
31-10 at that
31-10 at the time, and it was the third quarter.
Yep.
The Bills take their foot off the gas. Let's be honest, because that's the way the game ended. Tua played bad. He threw 2 interceptions, 1 returned for a touchdown. Right? He's doing everything he can, and I too agree with you with what you said. It is inherent on him to know to slide, but at this point of the game, he's trying to lead a comeback. And that's where your brain ticks off.
I understand, but there's still a way to do it.
But he's not thinking that way. He's thinking warrior.
But he should be thinking that way.
Right.
Look, there's another thing. They just signed him to that enormous contract this offseason. One of the things that you have as a responsibility, in addition to your own family and your own health, is the organization has just invested an extraordinary amount in me. I have to protect the investment as well.
They invested in a guy that was banged up to start with.
Sure, but you would think that he would have learned from those things and not done the same thing again. Here's the other really concerning part. That was not a bad hit. He ran into Damar Hamlin, which there's huge irony there, but he ran into a guy. He didn't even hit a hard part. It wasn't helmet to helmet. It wasn't helmet to knee. It was helmet to bicep. And he got concussed, which seriously concussed again, which, again, we're not pretending to be doctors, but what you hear is there's a cumulative thing, and each concussion seems to require less of a blow. If you're at the point when running into a guy's bicep is leading to this, the next one presumably will require even less than that. Or, and so I don't know.
Maybe the league should step in.
Well, the league should step in, and I'll tell you what the league should do. The league can't force a guy to retire. The Dolphins, first of all, they got roasted last time when they let him play. Remember, he played a week after the one before and then had the really bad
his diagnosis. Concussion protocol.
Okay, well, you got to change your protocol then. If you can't see that was a problem, but nonetheless.
You hurt his back on the other one.
Yeah, hurt his back. Right. Maybe he hurt his back, but his back doesn't cause you to go into that fencing position with your fingers all tangled up
That's
again.
what I said at the time, too.
But regardless, so the league can't force you to retire. The league can enforce their protocol. Tell me how the league does not have now, it would probably have to be negotiated, I understand, with the collective agreement. But how does the league not have something in place that says once you've had a concussion identified in a game, if you wish to participate in future action, you must wear one of those Guardian helmets. The NHL requires players to wear a mask, a shield. You can't not wear a shield anymore. You have to wear a helmet. You have to wear certain pieces of equipment. And that equipment, it's not a guarantee of safety, but it's another tool. And if you've got guys that have already been injured there, how is that not a requirement? Frankly, I don't understand, and I'm not a football player, all right? I'm not a pro football player. I don't pretend to be. I'm not suggesting anything. I don't understand how guys are going on the field with the option to have a piece of equipment that can save their brain and choosing not to use it. One guy in the CFL in Saskatchewan this year wore one. Can't remember who. One person has worn it in the CFL history. I don't know if anyone has worn one in an NFL game.
A lot did, especially offensive linemen during training camp.
Oh, in training camp, for sure.
But didn't.
And in practice, the Ticats wear them in practice, and other teams wear them in practice.
But it's weird. In practice, it's not like when we first started covering the Ticats or the NFL teams. There's no collisions anymore.
Accidental only, really.
That's it, really, right? It's not like there's full contact at practice or training camp anymore, which is weird. Why are you wearing it now? You're not. The chances of you getting blasted in the head or tackled in the head, it doesn't exist. So why aren't they wearing them now? And I went and looked up at that. Sorry, what's it called? The Guardian helmet. Okay,
yeah.
This was developed 11 years ago, right? They have perfected it to the point now where it weighs less than a pound on your helmet now. You wouldn't even probably know it's on your head.
This goes back to, we'll get back to Guardian in a second. This goes back years ago. There was a synchronized skating championship, world or Canadian synchronized skating championship at then Copps Coliseum. And I remember an ambulance had to be called because, we're talking about the synchronized skating with all the people. And one of them clicked heels or something and fell and hit her head. And at the time, I remember writing, this was shortly after the city had put in rules that said Zamboni drivers had to wear helmets. while they're driving the Zamboni, because some goofball somewhere, while he was like leaning out of the Zamboni, hit the glass or something. And so now everybody's got to wear a helmet driving a Zamboni. How do we have the guys driving a Zamboni with their head protected, but not figure skaters? And then I said, so you've now got like kids who are doing early pairs things with early lifts, and you got a 10-year-old or 12-year-old boy lifting a little girl, and she doesn't have to wear a helmet? How you got kids learning figure skating, skating backwards and doing jumps, spinning where you know that there's a good chance you're going to wipe out. You don't have to wear a helmet? And I was told at the time by some people in the figure skating community, well, it throws off your balance. You know what else throws off your balance? Being dead. If your head is smushed, if you've got horrible concussions, what's worse? But we don't want to wear them. We can't wear them in figure skating. It just doesn't work. In football, apparently, for some reason, it just doesn't work. But for the life of me, I can't understand why. You just said it. It weighs nothing. It looks goofy. I'm not going to suggest
Cares
otherwise.
what it looks like if it's going to save your life.
Exactly. And if nothing else, so quarterbacks in the NFL, I don't even know in the CFL, I assume they do. Never noticed. But in the NFL, they have that little green sticker on the back of their helmet. So rushing guys can see and know you don't. That's the quarterback. Of all people, the league has gone so far to protect quarterbacks, NFL and CFL. Why are at least quarterbacks not required to wear the Guardian? If those are the guys that are your league and you have to keep them healthy, at the very least, why are those guys not required to wear them? I just don't get it.
And I look at what the National Football League is doing, especially even more than the CFL. They've gone so far out right now to help promote, even in this country, with NFL Canada, flag football, right? Like, because they realize what's happening here, and they realize that we want people to still play football and enjoy the sport of football, which is, folks, one of my favorite sports. I love it.
We both do.
I'm like the rest of everyone watching the CFL, NFL on my couch. But these players need to be protected. And just like many sports have mandated certain particular aspects of safety, it's time for everyone to wear that extra padding. If it gives you a chance.
It makes no sense not to. And if you say, and they will say, that's part of a collective agreement, and you have to negotiate that, and what is the owners going to give us, which seems to me ludicrous. What are the owners going to give us for us to be safe? That's the most stupid argument you could possibly have. But beyond that, why are they not wearing these mandated in Canadian university football?
Well,
where you can put in a rule today and say, if you want to play, you're wearing one of these things. There's no collective agreement. You can say, guys, if there's a girl who ends up you have to wear these Guardian helmets because of for your protection. And any guy that plays football somewhere or hockey or whatever and is arguing against, I remember when they tried to bring neck after a number of neck injuries, and then what's his name with the Florida Panthers years ago, who got in Buffalo, had his neck cut.
Not Malarchuk.
No, after Malarchuk, and then there was a guy for the Panthers.
Oh, I remember, yes.
And then the guy died a year or two ago in Europe with the thing, and they tried to bring, and players, I'm balking at neck guards. I don't want to wear a neck guard. A neck guard's, it's going to affect my performance. How come guys fight against wearing anything that protects their head or their jugular vein, but not one of them would ever step on the ice without their jock?
Yeah.
I just don't get the whole point. I don't get the point why you fight against protecting yourself if it's something that doesn't affect your performance. If they told people you had to wear double runner blades, okay, that changes what you do. But to throw on a neck guard, they've shown that to throw on a shield doesn't stop guys. Connor McDavid, do you think Connor McDavid would put more points on the board if he wasn't wearing a visor?
I think he grew up, though. I think, and I'm just saying, from the old school guys, they grew up without the shield, without having to wear, because in OHL you have to wear a mask, right? You have to. And this is where I think you start, because
so great point. So you're 16, the World Juniors, the 16-year-olds have to wear a full cage. You've grown up wearing the cage. Why, when you then get to the OHL, do guys take off the cage? When you've grown up with it and you've been good enough to get to that level.
Because you don't have to.
But it makes no sense, because what's the difference? What's the difference? And
As you're a professional, you can make the choice.
But the Guardian thing isn't even, it doesn't affect you. You don't see it. It doesn't encumber you more because you're already wearing a helmet. It's not in your line of vision. It's not blocking air from getting through. You don't get hotter. And all it can possibly do is maybe help a guy like Tua, who we don't know. All right, we can't sit here and say that if he was wearing one of these things that you're seeing on the screen right now, if he was wearing this, we can't say for sure that he would not have had any of the concussions. But there's a chance that he might not have had one of those. There's a chance, and especially those helmet-to-helmet clashes. And he hasn't had those. I mean, amazingly, his head injuries have not been helmet-to-helmet. Mm-hmm. But especially on those, if you can take a little bit of that force out of there, again, let's use another example. A few years ago, good friend of this show, Simone Lawrence, got himself in a little bit of trouble with a hit on Zach Collaros. Yep. You'll remember early in the first game of the season, maybe, or second game of the season.
When he was a member of the Riders,
Yep. I don't know if a Guardian helmet would have prevented Collaros from having that concussion, but that was head-to-head. Yeah. If you can soften the head-to-head blow in any way, chances are some of those concussions may not happen. It's not a cure-all, but it's a tool. And if referees calling roughing the passer is not a cure-all, it's a tool, but we think that's important, why is this tool not important?
This is a discussion that can go on, and I certainly appreciate your opinions there. And we'll all have to ponder this because at some point this situation will likely come up again.
One more thing. Tua's brother, as most people know, now plays for the Ticats. He's on the depth chart for the game on Saturday as the third-string quarterback. Should he be wearing a Guardian? Eric Lindros had all kinds of concussions. His brother, Brett, also had concussions. I don't know if that means that susceptibility is genetic. I don't know if that means that or not. Again, some researcher can tell us whether that's the case or not. I don't know. But if your brother is the guy who's at the center of this discussion,
I wonder if it'll make him wear one.
Would he? I'm going to be fascinated to see if he would be the guy that would say, I don't care if it looks kind of goofy. I've seen what has happened to my brother. I am going to be the guy that is going to lead the way. And you know what? I almost bet you, it didn't happen in Saskatchewan, which I was surprised about, but I almost bet you that if one guy wore one here, that more than one would. Especially guys who have had head injuries or know people who have had them. Or maybe not even here. Maybe if a second guy wears it, then a third one wears it in the league. And within a year or two, you've got 30 guys wearing it or 50 guys. Who knows? But I'll be interested to see if it's an interesting connection.
No.
Because his brother is right here and is going to be on the field on Saturday, 2 days after this happens. Will he be wearing it? I don't know.
Speaking of the Tiger Cats at 3-9, they're in a must-win situation versus the 8-3-1 Ottawa Red Blacks, who can clinch their first playoff position since 2017. Now, based on their past seasons, are you shocked with this role reversal? Because as sort of mediocre as the Tiger Cats have been, when we look at some of these records, like Ottawa have 4-14, 4-14. They've been horrible.
They've been bad for they've been mostly bad in their 10 years, their 10 seasons. They've been mostly bad. But they've won a Grey Cup, which the Ticats haven't in those 10 years, and they've been to two Grey Cups. Yeah.
Lost to Calgary, win against Calgary.
Well, I think you're always a little surprised when a team that is traditionally bad finally starts to win. I think Leaf fans will leave the playoffs out of it. But I think Leaf fans, after those years of being mediocre or bad, are surprised when they put together 4 years of 100-point seasons in a row. There's some, again, playoffs notwithstanding, there is some surprise when that happens. When the Raptors finally started to win. So yeah, I'm surprised. Are we surprised that the Ticats are where they are?
Well, if Chantal, we can bring up that board, please. Like, look at where the Tiger Cats have been. Like, and that's why I use the word mediocre, right? Like, but the Red Blacks have been horrible, right?
If you go back, it's amazing you brought up this board, and Chantal will not have time on the fly to put up the last 30 years of Ticat seasons. But if you go back and look, what's amazing about this franchise is that 15-3 season in 2019 is such an outlier. You have the 1-17 year. You've got a couple 2-win seasons. You've got some 3-win seasons. More often than not, though, they are 8-10, 9-9, 10-8. This is a team that just lives in the middle.
But at least they make the playoffs. And in the CFL, all you have to do is make the playoffs, and anything can happen.
That is true. That is true. It's just amazing to me that over this time, that 15-3 is such a unique outlier for this team. You'd think over the years, considering you had those terrible years, you think you've also had some great years. They've been few and far, but they get to this Grey Cup 4 times since they last won. But boy, it's a franchise that just struggles to get into that rare air. Ottawa, meanwhile, for those terrible seasons, as I say, they've also been to 2 Grey Cups and won one.
Yep.
I don't know. So the other day when Edmonton. Was Edmonton the game before Toronto, before Labor Day?
Yeah, Edmonton, Calgary, right?
And they had Winnipeg as well. But anyway, when Edmonton rolled in, it was like, okay, you got the two last place teams.
Oh, sorry, yeah, against the Ticats, yes.
Against the Ticats.
Yeah.
And it was like, I could be not surprised if the Ticats won this by 30 or lost by 30. Well, it turned out to be the latter. Toronto rolls in for Labor Day. Felt the same way. I wouldn't be surprised. There is nothing that surprises me about this team. So when they play Ottawa on Saturday, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they beat Ottawa, whose record is so much better than theirs. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they beat Ottawa.
They should have beaten them in their last meeting.
They lost by 2. Yeah. It wouldn't
the stupid squib kick.
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Ticats win this. I would be shocked 0%. But at the same time, it also would surprise me 0% if the Ticats lose by 25 points and have a stinker because they've had 2 good ones in a row, and you're like, well, I don't know. This team is so... Their record is bad, but as a team, they're just so unpredictable still. You have no idea. You don't know, starting with the quarterback, you don't know what Bo Levi Mitchell is going to show up. He's been very good the last 2 games. Mm-hmm. And you can argue that he's been good all year, but for the interceptions, which are really bad, which got him to lose his starting job. This team is almost a reflection of him. You don't know game to game who's going to show up.
Well, I mean, I've always been weirded out by the sort of interception thing. Like, if you're going to put up the ball the most amount of everyone else in the league, the odds are that he's going to get intercepted.
And some of those interceptions, so in the first game of the year against Saskatchewan, the interception that led to the game-winning points,
yes,
where the ball was in his receiver's hands, Tim White's hands. All right, I don't count that as a Bo Levi Mitchell mistake. There have been times that he has been harmed by his own receivers.
Sure. And he's thrown some bad ones, too.
And he's thrown some bad ones, too. And the one thing you know, as we've learned over this year from talking to Scott Milanovich week after week, the one thing that makes his blood boil is turnovers. Oh, yeah, so if you've got one point of emphasis, if you're the quarterback, it's don't turn over the ball, which is why... When I mentioned Bo Levi Mitchell, you're going out on the field with one thing ringing in your ears. Don't throw an interception. And then when you throw, how many did he throw in that Montreal game when he got pulled? There was 2 in the first 3 series.
3, yeah.
You can understand that that's just not going to work.
2,
yeah, that's not going to. So, I don't know. I don't wager. Said this before on your show. I don't bet on sports. I don't bet on anything really. But I would never bet for or against the Ticats because they can look like the best team. They looked terrific against Toronto.
They look really good. And
then 2 weeks, 3 weeks before, they looked like the worst team in organized football against the Edmonton Elks.
No, they were really bad that game.
What do you predict? How do you know what to expect when they run out that tunnel?
I will say this. I really like whatever they're calling him. For whatever reason, I don't think they can call him a defensive coordinator. A defensive play caller.
Vice president, of defensive positioning and personnel.
Yeah, assistant defensive play caller, whatever. I think there's some salary cap implications of why they've chosen to. And I don't think he's getting paid either. Which
I believe he's not.
I believe he's getting paid, which I didn't know. So anyway, regardless, I think he's had some influence on this team. A team that
Chris
never
Jones,
took the football away. They've got in the last 2 games. I think they've had like 5 interceptions. A team that wasn't sacking the quarterback in 2 games has like 7 sacks. So he's finding the best of the bunch, and they're playing hard. Not that they weren't playing hard before, but they're playing really hard. And what I really like is that they have been physical. So let's see what happens on Saturday.
It's
unpredictable.
It was unpredictable. I would not. If you on Monday come in here and talk about a Ticats big win over second place Ottawa, I wouldn't be surprised.
No.
I wouldn't be surprised. But I wouldn't bet on it, but I wouldn't bet against it. It's just, it's a weird team this year.
Okay, now you want weird? This is the weirdest of the year.
Could be.
After originally
Do you want sound effects while this is happening?
Where's your phone? Is your phone off?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
After originally saying that he was hacked, ESPN commentator Shannon Sharpe has fessed up that, yes, I was having sex with my live feature on Instagram. It was on for the entire world to hear. Folks, if you want to hear it, you can go find it. It's somewhere.
Don't go find it. Just to take Bubba's word for it. It's out there. It happened.
It happened. According to insiders, ESPN do not plan to discipline their star commentator over the sex stream controversy. Your thoughts? Because I'll be honest with you, and people in the control room, I mean, this is all about giving me a great conversation, and I was like, oh man, I think I put on Instagram, I'm like, oh no, like this is not the greatest way to go down and get fired.
That's a very dicey choice of words right there. But anyway, leaving that aside.
I never thought about that until you brought it up. Sorry, folks.
So, when this happened, there's a few things that came to mind, and I tried not to think much about it. One is, I think I have Instagram on my phone. I almost never use it. I don't know how to do Instagram Live. I don't know if that's a feature you add.
You sound like him.
No, but I don't know how like, is this something, do you ever use it? Is this something that it's plausible that it was a butt dial kind of that you turned this on?
I'm not a big live user.
Okay.
I have watched people live. I kind of like.
But is it easy to turn on live?
I went and did. I figured this out because I was like, okay, how many steps does it take for live to, if I were to accidentally, because I've butt dialed people before.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, but you don't want to do it with this.
No, I haven't gone down that road. But it really is. It's 2 moves. If I do have Instagram, 2 things need to happen for you to go live, and it is that simple. Now, was he live before? Was he?
Yeah,
I don't know. And then it just like, who knows? Who knows? Because I've heard a couple of different stories from, even though he's come clean, there's been a couple of stories. I mean, like I said, he originally said he was hacked. But at the end of the day, it happened. And we've never seen anything like this with a...
No, we have. And that's what I was going to mention, because we have another example, sort of, to go to, which was, now I'm drawing a blank on his name. People will remember. They'll be screaming at their TV sets. CNN's legal guy, 2 or 3 years ago during COVID, they were having a Zoom meeting with staff. Now, it wasn't to the world. He didn't realize his camera was on when enjoyment of self was occurring.
Oh, yes.
And he got let go.
Yes.
And I kind of went, well, whether or not that was worthy of dismissal, I suppose the argument can be made, you're supposed to be in a news meeting and you're not really paying attention. But the humiliation alone seems to me to be as much of the penalty. Shannon Sharpe, I mean, look, I don't know whether they should... I don't understand how this happens, first of all, which is why I asked the question, because I don't know if this is something that is very understandable that it could happen or requires steps to be done. But you know that from now on, that's what people think now when they see Shannon Sharpe. He's going to live with that he was the guy doing the thing.
Well, until the next news cycle or something else comes on,
until someone else does it.
Until someone else does it. But I just thought that, okay, this is a tough one because, people have sex. Like this is not new, right? Now, he does work for ESPN, which is owned by ABC and Disney, right? Okay, so I thought there was maybe something there. And they're like, we don't want to do this, but we have to do this.
I think even Walt Disney had sex. he had children, so you know that he had to at least a couple times.
Some point.
So
right.
I don't know that, but no, if this was, if you could establish, and I don't know the answer to this because again I don't know how this thing works. If you can establish, it's really plausible that a guy just accidentally hit a button and it started this stream, then you're right. If as long as no one's arguing that anything was being done not consensually or whatever else.
And can I just say, I think what adds another interesting layer to it, he's a guy that's never been married. So there was no infidelity either that someone could say there was a clause for, like there's...
Yeah, I don't. If you can establish that this is plausibly accidental and no one's claiming any untoward or illegal or whatever, embarrassing, humiliating, probably, or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he's out there going, "I'm Shannon Sharp. Did you happen to?" I mean, I don't know. But
well, his followers went up, I'm sure.
Well, you're tuning in now every night to see. I don't know. You know who I feel badly for? Now, I don't know, and I hope we don't. Do we know who the woman was?
We don't right now,
well,
but there are outlets out there with some, which I will not name, that are out there trying to figure that out right now as we speak.
And that's where, to me, there's a chance, I suppose, we've seen it in the past, that person may decide this is my chance to cash in. Not against him, but just, I
write a book?
I want to be, we've seen people, remember, there have been people who have decided to explore adult entertainment options after things have happened. Who knows? But if she doesn't want to be known, that's where this thing becomes a problem.
Yeah.
If she doesn't want her identity to be out there, that's where this thing becomes an issue. If that ends up happening, and that's where it becomes way more serious than just a guy accidentally hitting a wrong button, if that's what happened.
Lesson to be learned, men and women. If you so choose, you want to have sex, put your phone on the night table.
It was. Put your phone in the other room. That's the thing. Not on the night table. It was on the night table. That's the whole problem.
Don't have it in the bed.
It was just have it out of eyesight and earshot.
It's afternoon time, too. This has all happened in the afternoon. What a story.
Oh, well.
Shohei Ohtani. He's got 47 home runs right now and 48 stolen bases. 17 games left on the schedule. Trying to become the first player in Major League Baseball history, a sport well over 100 years, to record a 50 home run and 50 stolen base season. He's DHing right now, so he's not on the field, he's not pitching. Would this make him the greatest DH of all time?
Oh, he already is. Right? There's no question. Who's the best before him? Edgar Martinez?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I mean, he's so far past that because Edgar Martinez was a great hitter, but you timed him with a egg timer.
Yeah, he was.
I mean, he couldn't run. That's the whole point with DHs. They don't run. You put big old guys there who can still hit a little bit, but no, this is
maybe it shouldn't be limited to DHs because no one, even positional players, have done this.
Who's had a better offensive season? Period. Now you can argue the one name that would come to mind would be Barry Bonds, the year that he had like 747 walks and hit all those home runs.
Yeah.
But there's a giant asterisk beside that. Whereas
personal for many. Yep.
I don't think that there is any. Well, we've heard there's no suggestion of anything with this. There's no suggestion of it. Gambling, potentially, at the start. Remember the story at the start of the year?
Yeah.
That's not got anything to do with his performance, though.
Nope.
We're going to put that as just until we know something that suggests otherwise.
Okay.
But even then, that doesn't... The bonds and the steroids, that was two things that were connected to performance. Even if he's gambling his brains out, it doesn't make him steal 47 bases or hit 48 home runs or whatever it is. I think this may be the best offensive season in baseball history. And I don't even know what he's batting.
Better, I think 370?
No, not batting 370.
Sorry, I think he's on base percent.
Yeah.
It's
but
well
it's
over 300.
yeah.
It's well over 300. But what about this? What about comparing that to what we just saw 2 years ago with Aaron Judge going 62 home runs? 62 home runs or 50-50?
How many steals
Because
did Aaron Judge have?
remember, too many people, I think yourself included, you've wiped Bonds out of your brain,
Pretty
I think,
much.
right?
And Maguire and Sosa.
And so that doesn't even exist. There are people that say that Aaron Judge is the all-time home run, single-season home run leader.
I could easily accept that, and I'd be more likely to accept that. But even then, Aaron Judge did one thing extraordinarily well. Shohei Ohtani is doing multiple things extraordinarily well, and by next year, he's probably going to be back throwing 100 miles an hour again, plus doing all this stuff, plus striking guys out as the ace of their staff.
Jeez.
And you just realize, as you watch this year coming to an end, once he hit the 40-40 mark especially,
That was the standard.
that was the Bonds 40-40.
40-40 benchmark.
You realize, my goodness, how different baseball and the story of the Blue Jays would have been if that story had turned out that he had come here. Now, again,
You had to go there.
well, and we talked at the time that happened. I was on the show with you, and we talked about it. And I never believed that it was real. I always thought the Blue Jays were the fulcrum that he was using to put pressure on the Dodgers to keep upping the ante and give him a bigger contract. But if he had come to Toronto, I don't know if he puts these numbers up in Toronto, but how different a year, how different are people aren't even talking about the Blue Jays now because the season has been so terrible. People have tuned them out by beginning of July. Most people had already said, okay, I can find something else to do. How different is this year's story about the Blue Jays if Shohei is doing this in Toronto?
I won't even go there because I agree with you. When I really thought about it, I'm like, this was never going to happen. He was always going to stay in California. It was always to be in his benefit to go from the one California team, the one LA team, to the other LA team. But this is crazy to me that he is doing this. And I am going to push this to the absolute limit because this is really hard to say. We have guys like Tom Brady who we can say are the GOAT because of what he's done. There are statistical things that you can go find number after number, wins, passing yardage, and at the end of the day, championships. Mm-hmm. If Shohei is going on this pace, and now you're saying even, which is so true, we could maybe by this time next year say, add 16 wins to it. 16-7 or whatever he ends up being. And he's similar offensive numbers. Is he the best baseball player of all time? Of all time.
So my only caveat to that is the same argument I give because it's really hard to compare eras. So the way you measure, I think, how great a guy is who was the greatest relative to the other guys of his era. Who has the biggest gap between himself and everybody else who played at that time? Because we can't compare Shohei Ohtani and Babe Ruth. We just can't. It's the
no
game
one's
is
seen
so,
Babe Ruth
or Babe.
Thank you.
But we just there's no way to compare. And if Babe Ruth was alive in 2024, chances are he doesn't look like a upside down pear. Like he is fit and he's eating right and he's looking after his health and he's doing all the things. He probably looks like Shohei Ohtani does now. If Babe Ruth is playing in you can't compare. So that if I use that measure, the same way I say Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player because if you compare him to anyone else who was playing at any other era, his gap from him to the rest was so much bigger than everybody else. Mario Lemieux eventually closed that gap, but when Gretzky was scoring 215, 212 points,
that was nuts.
And he would have won the scoring title just with his assists. Like it was crazy. So to me, Babe Ruth still has that biggest gap between himself and the rest of the guys and he was a pitcher, although not at the same time. So to me, Babe Ruth, the gap is still the biggest there. So I say he still holds that title. But you're getting into that discussion.
I can't believe I just asked you that question.
No, you're getting into that discussion.
But I think there's reason to start thinking this because this isn't 1 or 2 years with Shohei.
Nope.
This has kind of been building.
Yeah, no. I think that a few more years of doing the kind of things he's doing, I think that is a legitimate discussion to start having. Is where does he rank? And I don't know how many years do you have to do it for before is Mike Trout in that discussion? I think Mike Trout,
his health will never it holds him back.
Yeah, great
player.
His health and his crappy team, honestly, for almost every year he's played on a crappy team. But I think he's one of the great offensive players. But when you're talking greatest players in baseball history, without, and again, leaving the allegations and the stories back in the preseason about gambling, leaving that's not performance related, leaving that aside, because I still think Pete Rose is maybe the greatest hitter ever. We know what happened, but doesn't take away from his performance on the field.
He was spectacular.
I think if you are just breaking it down to that, no hint of steroids, performance enhancing anything, no cheating, I think he's got to, within a few years, be in that discussion if this continues.
I don't want to go too long on this because I'm going to have you back here on the show because I know you'll be ready and loaded for bear on this. But we're just days away from the Blue Jays being eliminated from postseason contention. What do we do with this team at this point right now if this team, eventually we're going to be eliminated? Like, what do you see? What's the future?
What should the future be, or what is going to future? The future should be that Ross Atkins should have been let go already, so that someone at the trade deadline could have come in with a clean slate and with a future and started making the moves that he or she wanted to make. There is no world in which Blue Jay fans are going to accept Ross Atkins being back as general manager next year. There is no way. You cannot, after how many years have they been there now? 8?
Yes, this is ninth season.
You cannot, the most brilliant debater in history cannot make an argument that Ross Atkins has done a good job as general manager. You took a team with parts that were left by Alex Anthopoulos, and I'm not pining for Alex, I'm just saying, you were left with a team that was a good playoff team, and you have consistently, after talking about how we're going to build the farm system, your farm system is one of the worst in baseball. You've got players who aren't good players. You've got Vlad Guerrero, who was not your choice. That was a Alex Anthopoulos gift. You have made this team worse and worse and worse. You cannot make a case to any Blue Jay fan, I don't think, that Ross Atkins is the guy to lead this team out of the wilderness. And if you decide to bring him back, I'm sorry, you've already rebuilt your stadium. You've got all the new bells and whistles. People have seen it. You are not going to sell tickets to this team. Who's going to come back if the guy who has ruined it is now the guy you're saying, oh, he's great, he's going to fix it. And I would argue Mark Shapiro should be on the next bus out right behind him. But he's the president. Less likely that's going to happen. But there is no conceivable way Ross Atkins should have his fingers anywhere near the pie of this team.
I have to go this way because I feel it's important to look at both sides. Ross Atkins, you can't blame him for Vladdy's slow start to the season, which was horrible.
Yep.
And he's been unbelievable in the second half after the All-Star break. Guys that Ross Atkins brought in, like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, really played very well in the offseason. I laughed at it in the offseason. I'm like, this is what you're doing?
Yep.
Right? They apparently did go all out for Shohei. I got to give him some credit for that. And yes, and this is the first year, I think, in their reign where they're not making the playoffs. Does he not buy a little time here to try and rebuild this? Seeing what has to happen now, where he's sort of familiar with the situation that in what's going to happen with Vladdy and Bo Bichette hitting their final year before a contract has to be signed.
Let's combine them for a second, because it seems that Shapiro and Atkins are a package deal almost. It almost seems like that. Go back to their days in Cleveland together. How many playoff series has Mark Shapiro won in the last 20 years?
0.
I think it's 0. I think it's 0. This is not. There is little evidence that these guys are winner builders. If you have 1 or 2 years, you say, well, I haven't had time to do this yet. Where is the evidence? This is not a small sample size anymore. They've had lots of time. Guys who are now retiring from baseball were the guys starting out when they came to join the Blue Jays. A 9-year baseball career is a decent baseball career. You've had plenty of time to turn over the roster in your image, to create the team in your image, and the team is worse now than it's been. They haven't won a single playoff game. Forget a series. They haven't won a game with the Blue Jays.
Many of the losses in an embarrassing fashion.
I know what your point. I get your point, and I have heard it about the idea about Guerrero didn't play well and all that kind of stuff. But if your franchise hopes are riding on one guy, and if he doesn't play well, we're swirling down the toilet. That's a bad plan. That's a really bad plan, because what would have happened if Guerrero got hurt in spring training? If he took a fastball in the hand and broke his hand and was out for 2 months? Are you just going to say, well, that was our plan. Oops, I guess we wait for next year.
But I could also say Barrios. I could look at Gosman. I could look at, I keep calling him Stripling, but the guy from the Mets. The human rain delay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm talking. What I'm trying to say is that they've had some. Their starting pitching is pretty good.
So they've been able at times.
All built by them.
Okay. So at times they've been able to bring parts together, but that's like saying, I've got a fantastic race car. One day the outside of that car is the best looking car in the world, but the engine doesn't work. And then the engine works, but the outside is all smashed up. Mm-hmm. And then the engine and the outside are both going great, but the tires are all flat. You only can be judged. This is who was it who said about, I think it was hockey. I don't know what league it was. What was the coach of the GM who says this isn't the try hard league? This is the win league.
that was
who was that?
That was Josh Donaldson.
Was it Donaldson? All right,
yeah, Donaldson.
All right, this isn't the try hard league. This is the win league. If you've had little bits and pieces that have worked, but you haven't been able to construct it, like a chef who has good ingredients but puts together a meal that tastes like vomit. You can't say, yeah, but I had good ingredients. I had fresh kale that went into that. Yeah, but you had this as well and it made it horrible. You can't look at the bits and pieces. You have to look at the entire pie, and the pie that they have served up to Blue Jays fans year after year after year has been rancid. They've done nothing. And they've had lots of time. You can't say they haven't had a long enough runway. They've had lots of time. They've had lots of money. They've had some good players, whether Guerrero has been great all year or not. And they've accomplished nothing. 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 On what basis does that earn you another shot at it? Because if you do give them another shot at this, that means presumably you're thinking it's another couple of years to rebuild this thing back. You're now looking at, we could be into the 2030s before a team if this is all about now building up the farm system and putting together young players and waiting for them to develop and hit their mark when they're at their peak at 26, 27, we could legitimately be at 2030 when this team
It's a long time from now, man.
That's the point. So are you willing to say that we're going to, based on their track record, give them that amount of time to rebuild this, and knowing that the last time they tried to rebuild it, it failed? So we could be at that point and it's still a failure. And now it's another... It just makes no sense to me.
Well, there'll be 12,000 people in the ball yard if this is the way this is going.
That's the only way this seems to... I don't understand what Rogers is doing, honestly. I don't understand that.
Well, their numbers are getting consistently beaten by the Canadian Football League right now.
I just don't understand how they are not more, and maybe they will be. Maybe as this season ends, they will, but I don't understand how they're not more seemingly publicly engaged in this, saying, yeah, we got to make some changes because this... Now, again, let's wait and see. We've got another 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever it is
I can't
left.
Imagine Edward Rogers is too happy as we speak about communications. You were one of the many outstanding employees at the legendary, now defunct...
What a horrible word. It's a good word, but it's a horrible word.
Yeah, it's a tough word because it's a tough business. 900 CHML, of course. There's been some time to sort of sit back and go on fishing. What are your thoughts about what happened?
So it's funny because the night that it happened, I tuned in to watch you on the sports because I thought you might, or somebody might say something, and they did. And you had mentioned that, you had to tell one of the staff people yourself what had happened. Well, that was me. But, so the story was, to be fair, my boss there had tried to reach me. I had got into my car to go down to the Tim Hortons field to do Ticats practice. And I think that the announcement, the phone calls telling people must have started like the minute I got into my car. And my phone went on to drive mode. So I get to Tim Hortons field 20 minutes later, and I get out and I'm walking. I've probably taken 20 steps and my phone rings, and it's you. And you're like, oh man, I'm sorry. And I'm like, but what? And I had no idea. And I'm looking down at my phone as we're talking, and I've got 7 missed calls. And so Bubba was the newsbreaker. And again, that's not taking a shot at the people there, because they had tried, when I went back and looked, they had tried multiple times to reach me. And
I didn't know what to do. It was
a tough day. It was a tough day. And it was, to me, the toughest part of it is, that to me was a second job. I loved doing it, but it was in the evenings I was doing my show. But I write for the Spectator, for the people like, Rick, who's been on this show many times. I know you had him on the day after or the day of. Scott Thompson, Paul Tipple, Shona Thompson, Lisa Pileski, Ken Mann. Go down the list. I'm forgetting all the operators, all the producers. All the people who worked there. That was their full-time job. That's who I feel badly for. I feel badly for myself only because I loved doing it. I really enjoyed doing the show. But I feel like I can be slotted at the absolute very bottom of the feel sympathy for, because all those other people, this has really affected their life more substantially than it has mine. And, I'm thrilled that Rick is continuing to do the 5th quarter on YouTube now. I think that's an amazing thing that he's doing. I've talked to a number of people who have been there, who have, some of them already begun to find new opportunities in some wild lines of work that I never would have guessed, but that they're, going, well, I'm actually really enjoying this. Well, that's great. I'm happy that they are enjoying it. But and the other people that I feel very badly for, honestly, I really do think that, like CHCH, like the Spectator, I think CHML really was, and I'm going to sound biased, but I think it was a really important part of the local community. And you heard that from so many people. I think it was a really important piece that is now gone, and I feel badly for people who liked it, who loved it, who relied on it. I feel badly because I lose something that I love doing, but there's so many bigger things that are at play that I feel worse for.
I think of, and look, and this is not to slam where you work, and obviously the people who sign my paycheck, but if something were to happen in Hamilton right now, we're not on till 6, and then 11 o'clock. Your paper won't come out till tomorrow.
Yeah,
CHML would have found a way to cover whatever was happening in Hamilton at this time.
So let me not undercut what you just said, because I think you're absolutely right. If there was a big enough thing, I remember when 9/11 happened. We just had the anniversary of 9/11. If memory serves, and I'm sure I'm correct on this, CHCH was on in the morning, but kept rolling the news through the day.
That was our format at the time.
Okay, but if it was something big enough,
right?
If it was a big enough news story, and I don't even want to say something out loud because I don't want to sound like ghoulish or something, but if it was a big enough story, I have no doubt that CHCH would break into its broadcasting and do something on it.
You're right, but a lot of things got to happen. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of different. We got to get it. The news, like a lot's got to happen.
But if it was big enough,
yes.
and the Spec has a website, a widely viewed website. We get tons and tons and tons of hits. That would be, the first thing. Shortly after, I don't know if this would happen again, but shortly after 9/11, you'll remember we had the blackout.
Yes.
Like a year later, what was it?
Yes.
And at the time, so many people thought that blackout has to be the next wave of terror strike somehow. And so the paper put out an afternoon paper that day because of the belief that people had that, so it was a special edition. I think it was probably the last special edition that was done. if it was big enough, would that happen again? I don't know, maybe. But you're right ultimately about CHML, that the first place that you might have turned to, because it was the easiest place to turn to, is just boom, the radio goes on and there's the update. And again, not taking anything away from CHCH, not taking anything away from the Spec. When people wanted to hear about whether their school was closed in a snowstorm, you could go on Twitter. You could do that for sure. But people were still tuning into that station because that's where they had always. One of the biggest ones, and I find this really funny because all the work that goes into all the other stuff is huge, but the one place where it still remains, I hear from people all the time, is I'm stuck in flipping traffic and I've got nowhere to tune on now to find out what's going on. And again, it's like a very specific thing, but yeah, it's a loss. The other thing, and this is what this podcast does. I know there are other podcasts here that do it. The other thing that I think is unfortunately really lost is a vehicle to let local newsmakers offer their thoughts on certain things, be grilled on certain things, be allowed to speak to certain things, to have many, 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 many voices. You can only do so many voices on a podcast. Whereas on a 2 or 3 hour show, you could have 9 different people on different things. That, I think, is a loss, too, especially with all the stuff happening at City Hall with encampments and taxes and this and that and the other, with stuff going on with elections and federal. And that's something that is unfortunately not there now. And I think it will be missed. I'm missing it more now. And that day that it happened that you called me, I guess I was more stunned than anything. It was like, oh, well, that sucks. It's 2 or 3 weeks later now that I'm feeling like I really miss doing it. Now it's like, I don't know, it's like that belated mourning or something. But it's like now it's hitting me more than it did that day.
Well, I'll say this, it's great that you can come on my podcast, and sometimes when there's immediate news at 6, you've come on, on CHCH News. But, I've always enjoyed coming on your program, and I know for maybe the first couple of years I was sort of your Monday night sports guy, and then you got a wonderful replacement as well, too, when I just became far too busy. And that was great to do exactly what we did just here, and talking about the hot topics of sports. And I know how many times I would be stopped and say, hey, I heard you're on the Radley show, right? Like it's amazing the power of radio and its differences. Ultimately we work at communication companies and do it in different ways in television and print. And then radio has its own beast and theater of the mind and all the things it can do. Unfortunately, AM radio is a sort of a dying breed that we're seeing. I don't even think there are a section of cars that don't even put in AM radios anymore, right? I think electric cars, the frequencies don't work or something, so they don't even do it. But to see a place that was around for 97 years serving this community, it's a big loss. But regardless, thank you for coming in. Yeah. This was a great one. This was a little lengthy, but man, we covered a lot of stuff. That was some really hot topics, and I've always enjoyed your candor and your opinions. They're always fun and controversial, all in the same way. Always educated, though.
Oh, well, sometimes. We try to.
Thanks for coming in, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that's the Sportsline Podcast for the day, and if you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports, and it could be about anything, folks. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote the Sportsline Podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. Share. And if you have something to say, please comment. We always appreciate it. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline Podcast possible behind the scenes, thank you so very much, and we'll see you next week.